Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Astro49 reads Tim Burton's The Nightmare Before Christmas. I do hope you're enjoying the series so far. Please remember to leave a like, share, comment, subscribe, as it really does help my channel grow. Bear with me, as I'm still dyslexic, but Nightmare Before Christmas is still one of my favorite movies of all times. Yep. Chapter 10. 357 days until Halloween. 0, I'm home. The ghostly dog blinked awake, his nose glowing brighter at the sound of Jack's voice. Jack climbed up the spiral staircase, eager to get to work. His visit to Dr. Finkelstein's castle had been a defining success. He'd managed to borrow every piece of equipment the scientific method mentioned: a microscope, test tubes, beakers, and burners, though it was a shame he hadn't run into Sally while at the castle. He have liked to thank her for the book, which had given him the idea to find the answer to this Christmas thing through tried and true methods. The scientific method laid out several steps any good scientist should take. The first step was to identify the question in need of answering. While that was simple enough, what is the magic of Christmas? Jack felt a delicious frosty chill in his bones just thinking of it. He was ready for step 2, research. But where to start? He carefully set up his makeshift laboratory on his desk, unpacking and arranging each of Dr. Finkelstein's borrowed pieces of equipment. Once satisfied with their placement, he went around his room gathering supplies he had pilfered from his visit to Christmastown. Holly sprigs, a snow globe bow, snow globe bows, okay, with a pair of tweezers. He carefully examined a holly berry from the sprig and placed it on the magnoscope's slider, then twisted the mechanical knob to inspect the berry more closely. He was anxious to move on to step 3, hypothesis, and then step 4, experimentation, so he could research step 5, observation. In his rush, he lowered the microscope lens too far, and it smashed into the slider. The glass cracked, and the berry leaked blood-red juice. He grimaced. Well, back to step 1, and this time, less rush. When it comes to science, you take your time. For his next experiment, Jack connected cables between a high-voltage battery to a beaker, and he was delighted when the connection shot out sparks. Using tongs to inspect a red and white striped candy cane into the boiling burner of chemicals, but when he extracted it, he discovered that the candy had lost its red coloring and gone as limp as a comatose slug. This isn't working at all. Luckily, Jack wasn't the kind of skeleton to get discouraged easily. If science wasn't providing results, maybe mathematics would. With one of the library books propped open on a bookstand on his desk, he studied the geometric diagram of a snowflake and using scissors and paper attempted to recreate the flakes' precious crystalline symmetry. But when he unfolded the paper, the outline of a spider looked back at him. Instead, it was starting to seem that whatever he did, he couldn't shake the Halloween spirit that haunted his every move. Undaunted, he skipped to step 3, hypothesis, and formed a theory as he examined the black but button eye of a teddy bear. The eyes are the windows to the soul was one of his favorite Shakespearean passages. Time to test the old bard's logic. Was the Christmas spirit held behind the bear's eyes, or perhaps in its belly? With a scalpel, he performed a teddy surgery on the bear, but its stuffing unraveled. No answers, not even when examined beneath a magnifying glass. Growing frustrated, Jack unhooked a decorative ball from his tree and smashed it into a glittery dust, which he poured into a boiling vat over a burner. The bubbling liquid erupted in a dazzling green glow. Ah, at last, results. Interesting reaction. He tapped his finger against his jawbone, but what does it mean? Step 6, conclusion. Still eluded him. The dirt was a soft thud. But, hang on. Sorry about that. Two of my pages got stuck together again. But he hadn't become the Pumpkin King by giving up. Across town, Sally gazed out the barred window of her cell at the odd greenish light that flickered in the turret window of Jack's house. It was well past midnight, but Jack showed no sign of turning in for the night. She thought back to the conversation she'd overheard earlier that day about a series of experiments Jack intended to conduct. That was the Pumpkin King she knew. When Jack set his skull to something, he saw it through to the end, even if it meant forgetting sleep and nourishment. Even the Pumpkin King needs help every now and then. She hummed to herself as she packed a basket of provisions she prepared during her confinement, a bottle of abstinence fortified with string, nesting a moldy hunk of cheese and fish bones. She attempted to she attached a thread from her sewing machine to the basket, unhooked the barred window, and swung it out. Then she used the machine's crank to lower the items onto the ground. She gazed once more at Jack's turret window, the light continuing to pulse and glow. Poor Jack, he's gotten so obsessed with this Christmas thing. The distance to the ground was dizzying, but if she waited too long, she might lose her nerve. Dr. Finkelstein had vowed never to let her out of the cell, so there was no hope of tricking him with nightshade-laced soup again. There was only one way to be free: jump. She took a deep breath before tossing herself out the open window. She gasped as the ground rose to meet her all too fast. She collided with the dirt with a soft thud. The impact snapped the stitching that held her limbs to her body. Her leg and one of her arms ripped off and landed a few feet away. An owl hooted overhead, and the trio of bats flew by, and not far away the undead ensemble played their gloomy ballad. Sally snapped her eyes open. She blinked, alive. With a pleasant smile, she sat up and used her one good arm to fish out the needle she tucked behind her ear. She threaded it with string from her pocket and hummed to herself as she dragged over her detached leg. She took care to add extra leaves to replace some lost stuffing as she stitched her leg and arm back on. Then she repaired her mangled hand and at last tucked the needle back behind her ear and tested out her repaired body. Good as new, she gazed up at Jack's turret window. She collected her basket and made her way past the undead ensemble playing their melody notes down the winding path to Jack's house. In his turret window, Jack was still frantically trying to solve the mystery of Christmas. He had uh, covered every inch of his blackboard with mathematical figures and equations, did the roasting temperature of chestnuts over an open fire equal the melting point of snow? What was the hypothesis of December 25th? If the Sugar Plum Fairy left town at a rate of 1 mile per hour and Sandy Claus sleigh left town B at 2 miles per hour, would they collide into stardust? As he scratched his skull thinking when he heard the squeak of a pulley outside his window. To his pleasure, the rope was moving slowly. A picnic basket came into view and gently bumped against the window. Curious, Jack swung open the window and peered downward. To his surprise, Sally was on the ground beneath his window, clutching the other end of the rope. He waved at her, a little puzzled by her present. Presence. Their past, their past had crossed on occasion, and she'd helped him with some sewing tasks here and there, but he was intrigued by what she might have brought him in the basket. He unhooked it from the pulley rope and set it on the windowsill, pulling back the cloth napkin. He was delighted to find some provisions and a bottle. When he uncorked it, it most the most delicious smell emerged. Why, how thoughtful. Grinning, he leaned out the window to call down his thanks to Sally, but his grin faded. She was gone. Sally quickly scrambled around the corner of Jack's house, closed his pumpkin-shaped gate, and pressed herself against the wall outside his yard. She'd always been shy around her fellow townsfolks, Jack most of all. When he had smiled down at her, her phantom heart had pounded so hard that she'd lost her nerve and ran away. At least he wouldn't starve now. It wasn't as though his bones could get much thicker. Sighing dreamily, she leant against the wall outside his house. Would Jack ever know how she felt? Maybe one day she would gain the courage to tell him, but for now she was happy just circling him from afar. helping where she could, like a little fairy sent by brighten his night. A cluster of thistles grew outside of his house, enjoying the cold wash of moonlight on her face and the freedom to stretch her limbs. She sank against a stone wall and picked one. She tore off a petal one at a time, singing the old child's rhyme to herself. He loads me not. He loads me, he loads me not. A strange tingling began to run down her cloth arm like static electricity, and before she knew it, the thistle shimmered and transformed into a miniature branching evergreen tree. She knew this feeling, a vision. Sally had had visions before, always beneath the moonlight. The last time one had happened, her threads of her sewing machine had appeared to turn into a hissing snake, and later that day she found a sick baby cobra in the grass outside Dr. Finkelstein's castle and fed it herbs until it felt better. Now the vision of an evergreen tree shimmering as colorful lights, a shining bulbs appeared on its tiny branches. She looked Oh, it looked just like Jack's tree. The vision of the little tree began making a music box. Oh, spinning like a music box. And she marveled in awe, so pretty. But in the next instant, to her horror, the Christmas tree sparked and caught fire, just like on Halloween when Jack had disguised himself as the Scarecrow. It erupted into flames that de declamated the branches and bulbs until the tree was nothing more of until the tree was nothing more than ash in her hands. Oh no. A terrible fear gathered in the pit of her stomach. She'd never had a vision like this one that was so eerie, dark, and deadly. She knew with every part of her body that something bad was about to happen, and it had to do with Jack's new favorite holiday. I have to tell Jack. In the morning, Jack paced inside his tower room after a long sleepless night made better only by Sally's picnic basket. Using the scientific method, he examined the precarious balanced castle he'd made made of holiday greeting cards, the cookies he preserved in atomical atomically jars, and even the toy doll with its painted on smile mocking him. Frustrated, he hurled the doll across the room, where it landed near zero with a soft thud and woke up the dog. I've read every Christmas book, Jack thought, with increasing aggravation. I've memorized the lyrics to every carol, and yet it eludes me. He collapsed in a fit of despair among the scattered library books. He had never been known to give up. Even the previous Halloween, when the vampires had contracted the plague and the creature under the bed had decided he was afraid of the dark, and the elder witch broomstick had snapped in two just as she'd been casting a spell on a terrified toad. He improvised. He'd swept it in and averted a crisis each time. It had turned out it had turned out to be the best Halloween of all time, but now he didn't feel anywhere near as confident. As Jack rubbed his temples, Zero floated up to his friend with a frame painting clutched in his jaws. Jack took the painting and studied it carefully, as it was a portrait of him posing in the pumpkin patch in front of Spiral Hill. The undersea girl had painted it using squid ink from her own ink sac, and he'd always been pleased with the way she captured the curvature of his skull. Zero gave a gentle yip. The colorful nose of the stringed lights behind him flashed on the artwork, casting it in shades of green, then red. As red light bathed the black and white drawing, Jack thought for a brief flash that he was actually looking at himself wearing Sandy Claus's red suit. The inkling of an idea built in the back of his skull. What if Christmas isn't as complicated as I think? He wondered. He'd spent days trying to understand the holiday when perhaps instead he should have been trying to improve it. Now it all made sense. The old ghoul Sandy Claus had been hoarding Christmas all to himself. Sure, he'd done a fine job up till now, twinkling lights and flying reindeers and wrapped presents with a stroke of genius, but the man was getting old. But the man was getting old. He was probably losing his touch if Sandy wanted his holiday to go from so-so to devilishly brilliant, then he need help. And who said Christmas was Sandy Claus's holiday anyway? Why couldn't it be a holiday for everyone? In fact, Jack thought as he stroked his chin, I already have some ideas for improving it while giving the old man a much-deserved break at the same time. This is going to end horribly. In a stroke of inspiration, he pulled the string of lights off his wand Christmas tree and dashed across his turret room, then dropped to his knees and slid over the floor towards his electric chair, where he draped the string of lights over the chair's back and plugged it in. He crackled in delight as the lights flashed and crackled. Gone was their humid holiday glow, but now the lights sparked. They threatened to explode. Now that was magic. Jack decided that Christmas needed a strong shock to bring it back to life, and he was just the skeleton to flip the switch. Hee hee. Outside, just beyond the wall surrounding Jack's house, Sally slumbered in the patch where she had found the thistle and had her terrifying vision. She awoke to the crowding of the reanimated corpses of a rooster and was surprised to find she wasn't alone. Several townspeople gathered at Jack's gate, fretting up, fawning up at the turret. Like Sally, just had also noticed Jack's odd, obsessive behavior. The vampire brothers lifted their cloaks against the rising sun. Something's up with Jack. They cautiously peered up at his spindly house before they swept away to the safety of the shadows. The wolfman pressed the next, growling, wondering before shaking his head and stalking away. As Sally brushed the dirt off her dress, the corpse kid huffed past her, tugging his mother by his leash. Oh, tugging his mother by his leash. Something's up with Jack, he echoed. Everyone in town seemed to have noticed Jack's spiraling obsession, but no one knew what to do about it. Sally listened to their fears, which weren't so different from her own. She was in the midst of debating what to do when Jack threw open his window and thrusted his head out. Eureka! He cried out triumphantly. Sally and the rest of the townsfolk loitering around Jack's gate looked up in surprise. Jack leaned out his window like a king presenting over his kingdom. He raised his hands into the air as string of colorful lights blinked behind him. This year, Christmas will be ours. The townsfolk all cheered at the Pumpkin King's proclamation, except for Sally, who hugged the bars of Jack's gates, fearful of her vision. That is the end of Chapter 10. Please remember to like, share, comment, subscribe. It does help my channel grow, and I will see all of you in the next episode. Goodbye.